If you postpone one simple checkup today, 10 years from now you might be sitting where I am, 3 times a week for hours at a time, connected to a machine that's doing the work your body can no longer do. Thank you for being here. Truly. If you're watching this, it means a small part of you is curious, maybe even concerned, about what happens when we keep saying, "I'll deal with it later." Stay with me for a few minutes. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you what later actually looks like. My name is Layla. I'm 63 years old. And 3 times a week I sit in a reclining blue vinyl chair while a dialysis machine hums beside me, filtering my blood because my kidneys can't. 624 hours a year. That's how much time I now spend connected to a machine. When I first calculated that number, it shook me. 624 hours. More time than I once spent carrying my daughter on my back during our family trip to Yellowstone. More time than the summer evenings I used to sit outside barefoot listening to my son talk about his dreams. I was always the successful one. By 30, I had closed my first 6-figure commercial real estate deal. By 34, I had the corner office, glass walls, skyline view, the kind of office that silently announces she made it. Before I turned 50, I had earned over $3 million. I negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. I could walk into a crumbling property and see potential no one else noticed. I understood value. I understood assets. I understood appreciation. Except when it came to my own body. One of the comments under my last video said something I can't forget. I missed me. When I read that, I had to pause. Because that's exactly what happened. I didn't lose my career. I didn't lose my family. I lost myself. From the outside, my life looked balanced. I was present. I coached my son's little league team for 6 seasons. I attended every school play. I planned birthday parties with themes and handmade decorations. I built a business and a home and a future. But I never built discipline around my health. I treated my body like a high-performance machine. Something designed to run non-stop. No maintenance required. No inspection necessary. My mornings were fast. Coffee strong enough to jolt me awake. Breakfast meetings with pastries or heavy diner plates. Lunch was whatever fit between closings. Dinners were celebratory, steak, wine, dessert. And every night, just one drink, to unwind. It didn't feel destructive. It felt normal. That's the dangerous part. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden collapse. No flashing red lights. I didn't miss work. I didn't cancel meetings. I didn't feel sick. My benchmark was functionality, not health. In 2008, my doctor said, "Layla, your A1C is 6.3. You're pre-diabetic." I smiled politely. I'll fix it. I meant it. I planned to start exercising the following month. Clean up my diet next quarter. Cut back after the holidays. That following month turned into 14 years. Each year the numbers crept upward. 6.3 became 7.1. 7.1 became 8.4. 8.4 became 9.6. My weight rose from 252 pounds to 278. Blood pressure medication went from none to 1 pill, then 2, then 3. Kidney function declined from stage 2 to stage 4. But I was still working. Still earning. Still traveling. So I told myself I was fine. The human body is deceptive in its resilience. It absorbs damage quietly, like a brand new car rolling over potholes without a sound. You assume the engine is strong. You assume everything's intact. Until one day it isn't. There was a comment from a woman who wrote, "I've worked like a machine for 7 years without annual leave. Now I have heart pain." That line stayed with me. We glorify endurance. We applaud hustle. We reward productivity. We rarely reward preservation. In real estate, I lived by one rule. Deferred maintenance costs 10 times more than preventive care. If you ignore a small leak, you replace the entire ceiling later. If you postpone roof repairs, you rebuild the structure. I applied that rule ruthlessly in business. I completely ignored it in my own body. And here's the truth no one wants to hear. Your body is the only property you cannot sell. You cannot renovate it from scratch. You cannot negotiate with biology. When my nephrologist first said the word dialysis, I still believed money could solve it. I consulted top specialists, enrolled in transplant programs, researched cutting-edge treatments. My entire life, when something broke, I fixed it. But cells do not respond to negotiation. One comment under my video said, $500,000 would save mine. I don't know the full story behind that sentence. But I know this, even millions cannot purchase back years of silent cellular damage. If you're still here, let me give you something valuable right now. You do not need a dramatic transformation. You need accumulation. The same way I accumulated neglect, skipped walks, oversized meals, postponed checkups. You can accumulate attention. Take a 20-minute walk today. Schedule one physical exam. Buy one bag of vegetables instead of takeout. Reduce one unhealthy habit this week. Not perfection. Direction. My son, Arash, works in IT in Charlotte and calls me every week. My daughter, Elena, teaches second grade in Savannah. She and her husband, Paul, have a 2-year-old daughter. My granddaughter, June. A few months ago, June grabbed my hand outside after the rain. "Grandma, let's jump." There was a puddle. Small. Ordinary. I couldn't. My legs felt heavy. My breath shortened too quickly. I was afraid of slipping, afraid of not being able to stand up on my own. I never thought one of my deepest regrets would be not jumping in a puddle. It's not the dramatic hospital scenes that hurt the most. It's the quiet exclusions from simple joy. I didn't miss my career. I didn't miss opportunities. I missed me. And if you've ever said, "I'll get to it," this story is for you. I am Layla. 63. Financially successful. But grateful. And dependent on a machine that reminds me 3 times a week that deferred maintenance always collects its debt. This is only the beginning. There is a dangerous comfort in the word normal. For most of my 40s and early 50s, I lived inside that word. Normal schedule. Normal stress. Normal dinners. Normal exhaustion. If you had looked at my calendar back then, you would have admired the efficiency. Every hour accounted for. Every deal tracked. Every family obligation honored. I was the woman who did it all. And I wore that reputation like a tailored blazer. Structured, sharp, impressive. What I did not see was how much of my life was built on quiet compromise. My mornings began before sunrise. The house would still be dim, the kitchen cool and silent. I would stand at the counter scrolling through emails before the coffee finished brewing. Strong, dark, almost bitter enough to hurt. That's how I liked it. I told myself it was fuel. A necessary ignition. Breakfast was rarely intentional. A drive-through sandwich between meetings. A pastry at the office because it was there. Sometimes nothing at all until noon, and then something heavy, fast, convenient. I convinced myself that skipping meals was discipline and indulgent meals were reward. In truth, both were in balance. By noon I was in negotiation mode, sharp, focused, relentless. I could sit across from seasoned investors twice my size and never blink. I knew the language of leverage. I knew when to pause, when to press, when to soften my tone just enough to close the gap between hesitation and signature. But I did not know how to pause for myself. Lunch meetings blended into property tours. Property tours blended into strategy calls. Strategy calls bled into early evening networking events where wine glasses appeared before water ever did. A glass to celebrate. A glass to unwind. A glass because everyone else was holding one. It was never reckless. It was refined. Controlled. Socially acceptable. That's what made it so easy to defend. I told myself I deserved it. I worked hard. I provided well. I showed up for my family. Wasn't that enough? At home I remained present, at least physically. I helped with homework at the dining table while answering emails on my phone. I listened to my children's stories about school while mentally calculating cap rates. I kissed them goodnight and returned to my laptop. I was there. But I was divided. There is a comment someone once left under my video. Kind soul. Sharing mistakes so others can learn. I appreciated the kindness. But I wasn't kind to myself back then. I treated my body like an employee I expected to work overtime indefinitely without complaint. And for years it did. When my doctor first warned me about my rising blood sugar, I treated it like a minor memo, something to file away and handle when convenient. Pre-diabetic sounded temporary. Reversible. It didn't feel urgent because nothing hurt. No sharp pain. No dramatic fatigue. Just numbers on a chart. Numbers I was very good at rationalizing. Business has been intense this quarter. I'll focus on health after this project. I'll start walking when the weather improves. I'll cut back next month. Next month became next year. There is something strangely comforting about numbers when they don't hurt. I built my entire career around numbers. Revenue projections, cap rates, square footage, return on investment. Numbers were clean, rational, predictable. If something wasn't working, you adjusted the inputs and recalculated. So when my lab reports began to change, I treated them like spreadsheets. In 2008, when my doctor first told me my A1C was 6.3, I nodded the way I would in a boardroom. Calm, analytical, detached. Pre-diabetic, he said gently. You can reverse this with lifestyle changes. Reverse. That word made it feel temporary, manageable, negotiable. I remember sitting in my car afterward, the engine idling, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't scared. I was mildly inconvenienced. I mentally rearranged my schedule the way I would for a new listing. I'll start walking in the mornings. I'll cut back on desserts. I'll schedule another check in 6 months. 6 months passed quickly. A1C, 7.1. That's diabetic range, my doctor said. So nothing hurt. No dramatic symptoms. No hospital visit. No emergency. Just a number moving in the wrong direction. But I was still closing deals. Still traveling. Still hosting dinner parties. Still wearing tailored suits and high heels that clicked confidently across marble floors. It's easy to ignore data when life looks successful. There was a comment someone left. Sad story, sorry for her. I understand the sympathy, but the truth is my life wasn't sad then. It was vibrant, busy, profitable, social. I wasn't lying in bed sick. I was flying first class to conferences and signing contracts over espresso. Disease does not always begin in darkness. Sometimes it begins under chandeliers. At my annual physical, my doctor would speak carefully, almost as if choosing words that wouldn't offend me. You've gained some weight. Your blood pressure is creeping up. We should talk about your alcohol intake. I listened respectfully. I even agreed. I meant it every time I said, you're right. But intention without execution is just comfort. My weight climbed slowly, from 252 pounds to 260. Then 268. Eventually 278. I avoided scales for weeks at a time. When I did step on one, I would tell myself it's temporary. Stress weight. Travel weight. It will come off. It didn't. Instead, new prescriptions appeared. One medication for blood pressure. Then a second when the first stopped being enough. Later a third. Each pill felt like a small adjustment, like patching a crack in drywall instead of addressing the shifting foundation. Meanwhile, my kidneys were quietly working overtime. I didn't understand then how diabetes affects the tiny blood vessels that filter waste. I didn't visualize the strain. I didn't imagine microscopic damage accumulating with every spike in blood sugar. Because nothing hurt. Pain would have been easier. Pain demands attention. Pain interrupts. Silence allows delay. One afternoon, after another routine checkup, my doctor didn't sit immediately. He looked at the screen longer than usual. Your kidney function has declined, he said finally. Stage 2. Stage 2. It sounded distant. Not urgent. There are 5 stages, I remember thinking. I'm only at 2. Plenty of runway. I approached it like a timeline, not a warning. I told myself I would course correct before stage 3. That I was too smart, too disciplined, too successful to let it progress further. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Discipline in one area of life does not automatically transfer to another. I had discipline for contracts, for deadlines, for negotiations. I did not have discipline for myself. The irony still humbles me. In business, I would never ignore a declining asset. If a property's value started slipping, I intervened immediately. Renovations, repositioning, strategic changes. But when my own biological asset began depreciating, I rationalized. There is a comment that read, "Thank you. I'm scheduling my annual physical today." That sentence moves me every time. Because a physical is not just a checkup. It is an audit. It is facing numbers before they become irreversible. I treated my health metrics like quarterly reports that could be managed later. Later became stage 3 kidney disease. By then, fatigue crept in more noticeably. Not exhaustion, just a heaviness that followed me. My ankles swelled after long flights. I needed more caffeine to feel sharp in the afternoons. So I functioned. So I produced. So I smiled in boardrooms. There is a dangerous myth in high-performance culture. If you are still delivering results, you must be fine. But your body does not grade you on output. It measures internal balance. The first time my nephrologist mentioned long-term risk, I felt a flicker of fear. It was subtle, like a draft in a sealed room. Without aggressive lifestyle changes, he said, this will progress. Aggressive lifestyle changes. That phrase sounded disruptive. And disruption was inconvenient. I had deals in motion. Employees relying on me. Children entering adulthood. A retirement plan forming in my mind. Portugal, tiled balconies, wine at sunset. I kept telling myself I would get serious soon. But serious never fully arrived. Instead, the numbers continued their quiet climb. A1C, 8.4. Kidney function, declining. Blood pressure, controlled only with multiple medications. I still didn't feel sick enough to panic. And that is the most deceptive phase of chronic illness. The stretch where damage accelerates without drama. I think about one more comment often. Someone wrote, "You are correct 100%. I worked like a machine and now I suffer with heart pain." Like a machine. I used to pride myself on that comparison. Reliable, efficient, tireless. But machines require maintenance schedules. Oil changes, inspections, replacement parts. I skipped my own. By the time my kidney function reached stage 4, the tone in the doctor's voice changed. It was no longer advisory. It was grave. "Layla," he said, leaning forward, "we need to prepare you for the possibility of dialysis." That word landed differently than pre-diabetic. It was heavier, concrete, final. For the first time I felt something beyond inconvenience. I felt consequence. I drove home in silence that day. No music. No calls. Just the low hum of the engine and a thought repeating in my mind. How did I let it get this far? Not because I didn't know better, but because I believed I had time. That belief, that time is generous, that damage is reversible, that tomorrow will always offer another chance, is the most expensive assumption I ever made. The numbers never screamed. They whispered. And I chose not to listen. The next chapter of my life would not be written in spreadsheets or contracts. It would be written in hospital charts. And for the first time the numbers would hurt. There are words you hear in life that pass through you gently. Routine, manageable, temporary. And then there are words that land like stone. Dialysis was stone. The first time my nephrologist said it clearly, not as a distant possibility but as preparation, the air in the room shifted. I remember the faint antiseptic smell. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights. The chart glowing on the screen beside him. "Your kidney function is now stage 4, he said. "We need to begin discussing renal replacement therapy." Renal replacement therapy. Even then he was cushioning it. I nodded slowly as if I were reviewing a complex contract. Inside though something tightened. Not panic, not yet. More like disbelief. This was not the version of my 60s I had envisioned. I had a retirement board saved on my laptop. Portugal. Sunlit balconies with blue tiles. Wine glasses sweating in golden light. Sardines on ceramic plates. Long walks by the water. I had told my husband, half joking, "We'll slow down properly one day." One day. That phrase again. On the drive home I didn't cry. I analyzed. I thought about transplant lists, private specialists, international medical options. I thought about money, because money had solved nearly every obstacle in my adult life. If a deal was stuck, I negotiated harder. If a property underperformed, I repositioned it. If a market shifted, I adapted. I assumed there was always leverage. But biology has no leverage. In the weeks that followed, I met with top nephrologists. I asked detailed questions. Survival rates. Alternatives. Emerging treatments. Clinical trials. I approached it like due diligence before a major acquisition. One of the doctors, a calm woman with silver hair and steady eyes, finally said something that pierced my strategic thinking. "Layla, this isn't about finding a loophole. It's about managing damage that has already been done. Managing damage. Not reversing it. Not eliminating it. Managing it. That was the first time I felt regret in its full weight. Not guilt, not embarrassment, but regret. The realization that the version of me who said, "I'll get to it," had quietly signed a contract my present self could not cancel. I remembered a comment someone left under my video. $500,000 would save mine. I understood that desperation. That bargaining instinct. The hope that there is a price tag somewhere. A number that unlocks escape. But there isn't. Kidneys do not respond to capital. Eventually, the preparation became practical. Vascular access. Scheduling. Education sessions about what dialysis would look like. Words like fistula and fluid restriction entered my vocabulary. I kept working through all of it. I sat in boardrooms discussing multi-million-dollar developments while knowing that in a few months, I would be sitting in a medical chair for hours at a time. The contrast was surreal. One morning, after another appointment, I sat in my car and finally allowed myself to imagine it fully. 3 days a week. 4 hours each session. A machine filtering my blood. 624 hours a year. When you say it that way, it sounds like a statistic. When you live it, it is time extracted from your life in visible blocks. The first day of dialysis is a memory I carry vividly. The room was larger than I expected. Rows of chairs. Soft blankets folded neatly. Machines standing beside each patient like quiet sentinels. Some people watched television. Some slept. Some stared into space with the distant look of those who are counting something invisible. When the nurse connected me, I tried to remain composed. I have always valued composure. But there is something humbling about watching your own blood travel through clear tubing into a machine and back again. It is impossible to ignore your vulnerability in that moment. The machine hummed steadily. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just constant. A mechanical heartbeat beside my own. 4 hours is a long time when you are still. I used to measure my days in meetings, phone calls, progress. Now I measured them in cycles and alarms. In fluid levels and lab values. The first few weeks I told almost no one outside my family. I wasn't ashamed. I just didn't know how to explain it. I had spent decades presenting strength. How do you suddenly present dependence? At home, my husband became quietly attentive. He never made it dramatic. He would help me stand if I felt lightheaded. He would bring water at exactly the measured amount I was allowed. Once, when I struggled to get out of the bathtub because my legs felt weak, he reached down and steadied me without comment. That moment, simple, tender, broke something in me. Not because he helped, but because I needed it. I thought of another comment someone wrote. You are correct 100%. I worked like a machine, now I suffer with heart pain. Machines eventually overheat. And when they do, they cannot fix themselves. There is a particular kind of grief that comes with chronic illness. It is not loud. It does not arrive with dramatic music. It arrives in quiet exclusions. Not being able to walk as far as you once did. Needing to plan your week around treatment schedules. Watching others move freely while calculating your own limits. The day my granddaughter June asked me to jump in a puddle was after I had already begun dialysis. The rain had just stopped. The pavement shimmered. She was wearing bright yellow boots. Grandma, come on. I wanted to say yes without hesitation. Instead I calculated. Balance. Energy. Risk. What if I slipped? What if I couldn't get up easily? I'll watch you, I said softly. She jumped. Water splashed. She laughed. I clapped and smiled. But inside I felt the quiet tax of every postponed walk, every dismissed warning, every later. The loss was not dramatic. It was subtle. And that subtlety is what makes it so painful. I used to believe that regret was about missed opportunities, business deals you didn't close, chances you didn't take. Now I understand that the deepest regret is missing simple participation in your own life. When I sit in the dialysis center, I sometimes look around at the other patients. Different ages. Different stories. Some are younger than my children. Some older than my parents ever were. Illness does not discriminate neatly. But neglect? Neglect is personal. If you are listening to this story, I want you to feel something. Not fear, but clarity. Clarity that the body keeps record. Clarity that productivity is not protection. Clarity that wealth is not immunity. Dialysis did not arrive suddenly. It was built slowly, decision by decision, year by year. And by the time the word could no longer be softened, it was already written into my future. This was the moment I understood something I wish I had grasped decades earlier. Deferred maintenance always collects. And sometimes, it collects in hours attached to a machine. I was 47 years old when I realized that the story of my wealth was not really about money. It was about hunger. Not the kind that twists your stomach, but the kind that lives in your bones and whispers that you were meant for more. When people look at me now, the woman in tailored silk stepping out of black cars, speaking at conferences about financial independence and legacy, they assume I was born into certainty. They see the headline version of my life. They do not see the nights when I counted coins on a kitchen table that wasn't even ours. I was 23 when I made my first real decision, the kind that splits your life into before and after. I had grown up watching my father gamble away stability and my mother stitch dignity together from borrowed money and quiet tears. I promised myself I would never live at the mercy of someone else's chaos. And yet, for years I did exactly that, not with cards or casinos but with fear. Fear of starting. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of being the ambitious woman people love to judge. At 28, I launched my first company with money I did not have and confidence I had to fake. I remember standing in a tiny rented office that smelled of old paper and cheap paint, staring at a desk that felt too big for me. I told myself, one day this will be a story you tell with pride. At the time it felt like a lie. The first year was humiliation disguised as effort. Investors smiled politely and declined. Partners underestimated me. Competitors ignored me, which hurt more than open rivalry. But what I lacked in reputation I replaced with obsession. I studied markets until sunrise. I memorized negotiation tactics. I learned to speak with calm authority even when my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might betray me. The breakthrough did not come as fireworks. It came as a single yes. A contract others thought was too small to matter became the crack in the wall. Revenue trickled in. Then it flowed. By 33 I was no longer surviving. I was scaling. And scaling changes you. Success tests your character more brutally than failure ever could. Suddenly, everyone wanted proximity. Invitations multiplied. Compliments became currency. I had to learn a new discipline. The discipline of discernment. Not every opportunity is aligned. Not every smile is sincere. At 36 I made the decision that defined my empire. While others expanded aggressively into visible luxury markets, I moved quietly into infrastructure. The invisible systems that make visible success possible. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't photograph well. But it was foundational. That pivot multiplied my wealth in ways even I had not predicted. By 40, financial freedom was no longer a dream. It was a documented fact. But here is the part no headline captures. The loneliness of elevation. Wealth isolates before it liberates. Old friends feel distant. New acquaintances feel strategic. Trust becomes rare. I had to confront a truth I had avoided for years. I had built an empire outside, but inside I was still that 23-year-old girl trying to outrun instability. So at 42 I did something that shocked my board. I stepped back. Not away but inward. I began rebuilding my life with the same intentionality I once reserved for profit margins. Therapy. Travel alone. Philanthropy with purpose instead of publicity. I funded education programs for girls who reminded me of myself. Ambitious, underestimated, burning quietly with potential. For the first time, my wealth felt aligned with my values. Now at 47 when I tell this story, I do not speak as a woman obsessed with accumulation. I speak as a woman who understands leverage. Not just financial leverage but emotional leverage. The ability to transform pain into power. Doubt into discipline. Rejection into refinement. If there is a lesson hidden inside my journey, it is this. Success is not built in the spotlight. It is built in the private negotiations you have with yourself. The nights you choose courage over comfort. The mornings you rise before your excuses do. The years you invest when no one is watching. People ask me what the turning point was. They expect a dramatic betrayal, a lucky break, a secret strategy. But the truth is quieter and more demanding. The turning point was the day I stopped asking whether I was ready, and started acting as if I was inevitable. And if you are listening to me now, wherever you are in your own story, Whether you are 23 and uncertain, 33 and exhausted, or 47 and redefining, understand this. The distance between who you are and who you could become is bridged by decisions. Repeated, disciplined, uncomfortable decisions. I am not proud of the money. I am proud of the woman I had to become to earn it. I am 51 now. Age has a way of sanding down the sharp edges of ambition. At least that's what I used to believe. I thought that by this point in my life, the fire would be softer, the hunger quieter, the need to prove myself long extinguished. I was wrong. The hunger never leaves. It just changes its shape. When I turned 48, I sold a major portion of my company, the very company I had built from that cramped office with peeling paint. The valuation made headlines. Financial magazines called me self-made, visionary, disciplined. They loved that word, disciplined. As if discipline were something you wake up with like eye color. They didn't see the cost of it. They didn't see the relationships I let wither because I was in expansion mode. They didn't see the birthdays I attended with my laptop open under the table. They didn't see how difficult it was to date as a woman whose net worth intimidated men before they even understood her heart. At 51, I no longer introduce myself with numbers. When I was younger, I did. Not directly, of course, that would be crude. But everything about me signaled scale. The brands, the posture, the vocabulary of dominance and strategy. I wore competence like armor. Because for a long time, competence was the only thing that kept me safe. There is something people rarely admit. Wealth amplifies who you already are. If you are insecure, money will make you paranoid. If you are generous, money will make you powerful. If you are wounded, money will give your wounds better lighting. I had to confront my own amplifications. After the sale, I found myself in a silence I hadn't experienced in decades. No quarterly pressure. No emergency calls. No negotiations stretching past midnight. For the first time since my 20s, I wasn't running towards something. And that terrified me. Because when you stop running, you hear things. Regret. Longing. Questions that were always there but drowned out by momentum. What do I actually want now? Who am I without the chase? If no one needed my leadership tomorrow, would I still know who I am? At 49, I made another decision. One that felt riskier than launching my first company. I began investing in women-led ventures quietly, anonymously at first. Not as a mentor standing on stage, but as a partner sitting at the table. I listened more than I spoke. I remembered what it felt like to walk into rooms where no one expected you to win. I saw myself in them, in their trembling hands, in their over-prepared presentations, in the way they apologized for taking up space. I stopped them every time. Do not apologize for ambition, I would say. Just refine it. And somewhere in guiding them, I began healing parts of myself. At 50, I did something else unexpected. I fell in love. Not with a man who needed saving. Not with someone dazzled by my resources, but with someone steady. A widower with silver at his temples and patience in his voice. He did not ask what I was worth. He asked what I feared. That question unraveled me more than any financial audit ever could. Loving at this stage of life is different. It is not fueled by fantasy. It is fueled by choice. We chose each other deliberately, two adults with scars, with histories, with independence intact. For the first time, I was not the dominant force in the room. I was simply a woman, flawed, learning, soft in ways I once thought were weaknesses. And here is the truth I understand now. The greatest return on investment in my life was not a company. It was self-awareness. At 23, I was driven by survival. At 33, by expansion. At 43, by significance. At 51, I am driven by alignment. Alignment between who I am privately and who I am publicly. Alignment between my wealth and my values. Alignment between strength and tenderness. If I could speak to the younger version of myself, the girl counting coins on a borrowed kitchen table, I would not tell her how rich she will become. I would tell her this: you will build more than a fortune. You will build standards. You will build resilience. You will build a name that stands on its own. But do not forget to build a life inside the empire. Because one day, when the contracts are signed and the applause fades, you will sit alone in a quiet room, and the only thing that will matter is whether you recognize the woman in the silence. I do. And for the first time, that is enough. I am 58 now. Time no longer feels like something I need to conquer. Feels like something I must honor. When I look back across the decades, the hunger of my 20s, the acceleration of my 30s, the dominance of my 40s, the recalibration of my 50s, I see a pattern I could not see while living it. Every season demanded a different version of me. And every version thought she was the final one. She never was. At 52 I thought I had mastered balance. I was investing wisely, loving steadily, speaking publicly only when I truly had something to say. I had reduced my portfolio to businesses aligned with sustainability, education and infrastructure. Long-term value instead of short-term noise. My name still carried weight in financial circles, but I no longer chased relevance. Relevance chased me. But life, I've learned, does not negotiate with comfort. At 54 the market shifted violently. A global downturn rippled through sectors I had considered stable. I watched valuations shrink. I watched confident founders unravel. I watched panic return to rooms I thought had evolved beyond it. And something unexpected happened inside me. I did not panic. The younger me would have tightened control, micromanaged, fought aggressively. But this time I assessed calmly. I restructured quietly. I absorbed losses strategically. Wealth, when built patiently, can withstand storms. But more importantly, I had built myself to withstand storms. That was the real dividend. In those uncertain months, many younger entrepreneurs called me, voices shaking. "Are we going to lose everything?" they asked. I told them the truth. You might lose money. You might lose momentum. But if you do not lose your discipline, you have lost nothing permanent. Because that is what I had learned across 3 decades. Money is volatile. Character is equity. At 55 my mother passed away. She did not live long enough to fully understand the scale of what I built. To her, I was simply her daughter. The stubborn girl who refused to accept limitation. Sitting beside her hospital bed, I realized something piercing and humbling. None of my achievements could negotiate with mortality. In that quiet room, stripped of titles and assets, I was not a magnate, not an investor, not a strategist. I was just her child. Grief reorganized my priorities faster than any recession ever could. After her passing, I established a foundation in her name. Not a flashy institution with marble walls, but a working engine that funds vocational training for women over 40 who need to rebuild their lives. Women abandoned. Women restarting. Women underestimated. I understood them deeply. Reinvention is not a luxury. Sometimes it is survival. At 56 I began writing, not publicly at first. Private journals. Reflections. Stories of negotiations that never made headlines. Stories of failures that shaped me more than the winds did. I wrote about the first investor who dismissed me with a smile. About the night I almost shut everything down. About the loneliness of hotel rooms after triumphant conferences. I wrote about fear. Not the dramatic kind, but the subtle whisper. What if this is as far as you go? At 58 I no longer ask how far I can go. I ask how deeply I can live. My wealth today is structured to outlive me. Trusts, diversified assets, long-term holdings. Systems that function without my daily involvement. I built succession plans not because I am tired, but because true power is the ability to step away without collapse. Legacy is not about control. It is about continuity. The woman I am now wakes before sunrise not to check markets, but to walk in silence. I read more than I speak. I mentor selectively. I decline invitations that do not resonate. My calendar is lighter, but my impact is sharper. And love, steady, mature love, remains. We sit together in the evenings, sometimes speaking, sometimes not. There is a kind of intimacy that does not require performance. I did not understand that in my 30s. I do now. If you are somewhere earlier in your journey, let me tell you what no one told me. Ambition is sacred, but it must evolve. Power is useful, but it must soften. Money is a tool, but it must serve something larger than ego. I once believed the goal was independence. Now I understand the goal is integration. To be powerful and peaceful. Strategic and sincere. Wealthy and grounded. When I look in the mirror today, I do not see the girl counting coins. I do not see the executive commanding rooms. I see a woman who has negotiated with fear, danced with risk, endured loss, embraced love, built systems, lost sleep, gained wisdom. I see a woman who understands that the most important portfolio she ever managed was herself. And for the first time in my life, growth no longer feels like climbing. Feels like becoming. I am 64 now. Time has a way of clarifying everything. Showing you which battles mattered, which ones were illusions, and which moments were quietly extraordinary while you were too busy to notice. I have walked through decades of triumph and trial, of accumulation and loss, and I have finally arrived at something that feels like truth. The only wealth that cannot be replicated, negotiated, or purchased is the wealth of life fully lived. The health, presence, and connection that no money can restore once it is gone. When I look back to my 40s and 50s, I see urgency. I see discipline applied with precision but sometimes misdirected. I see the younger versions of myself chasing contracts, deals, and growth while silently ignoring the fundamental contract with my own body. I had believed I was invincible. My wealth, my intellect, my network, all would protect me from the slow, invisible accumulation of damage. But it does not. It started subtly. Fatigue, swelling in the ankles, restless nights. Numbers on lab reports creeping upward. Pre-diabetic warnings dismissed. Blood pressure climbing, weight creeping. At the time, these were mere inconveniences easy to overlook. After all, I could still negotiate, still travel, still stand in boardrooms and deliver results. I was still functioning. I had the illusion of control. But the body keeps score in silence. And the more you ignore it, the louder the consequences grow. By 59, reality could no longer be postponed. My kidneys, once resilient and dependable, faltered. Stage 4. Dialysis became inevitable. I found myself sitting in a sterile room, blood flowing through tubes into a machine that hummed steadily beside me. Hours and hours, 3 times a week, each moment a silent reminder that deferred care exacts a toll you cannot repay. Watching others move freely, dancing, laughing, embracing life while I counted my limits, I finally understood the deepest form of regret. Not the deals lost, not the contracts missed, not even the wealth that had once seemed so vital, but the simple joys I could no longer participate in. A grandchild splashing in a puddle while I watched from the sidelines. A hike I could no longer climb. A conversation that required more energy than I could spare. I remember my granddaughter June laughing as water splashed around her boots. I wanted to join, to feel that same abandon, that same freedom. Instead, I smiled quietly, silently calculating risk, energy, balance. The cost of procrastination had arrived, and it was measured in hours, in breath, in lost moments. And yet, even amidst this reality, there is clarity. There is understanding. Wealth, influence, and accomplishments matter. But they cannot substitute for the one resource we all take for granted until it is too late: our own health. No amount of money, no powerful connection, no strategic negotiation can restore it once it is gone. I have come to measure my legacy differently. Not by the properties I own, the deals I closed, or the accolades I received, but by the systems I built for others, the lessons I can share, the moments of presence I still carve out despite limitations. My foundation, mentoring, and storytelling are now the architecture of what I leave behind. They cannot be sold or stolen. They are extensions of choices I make each day, to care, to guide, to be present. To anyone listening, I offer this freely, without fees or hidden agendas. Your body is the only property you truly own. Every meal, every walk, every decision about sleep, movement, and indulgence compounds into the architecture of your life. Deferred maintenance costs more than effort or discomfort. It costs years of your life and sometimes irrevocable moments with those you love. Start small. Start now. One walk. One healthier meal. One annual physical. One honest conversation with yourself about the choices you make every day. These are not dramatic gestures, but they are powerful. They are the difference between life observed from the sidelines and life fully experienced. The wealth I accumulated cannot restore my full physical freedom, cannot allow me to run freely alongside my granddaughter, cannot take away the hours spent in machines filtering my blood. But it can serve as a reminder. Discipline is universal. The lessons I applied in business and relationships must also be applied to the vessel that carries me through all of it: my body. I close this chapter not with despair but with encouragement. Life will always present opportunities to choose. Some will tempt you with convenience. Some will demand vigilance. Choose wisely. Begin today. Do not wait. The true richness of life is found not in what you accumulate externally, but in what you nurture internally. And above all, treasure your body. It is the only home you truly own. Protect it, maintain it, listen to it. Because everything else, wealth, recognition, influence, is meaningless if you cannot inhabit your life fully. This is my story. My warning. My legacy. If you want, I can now compile all 8 chapters into one continuous, fully polished story in English, making it a seamless narrative for your video that would last approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes when read aloud. This would integrate all the lessons, hooks, and emotionally compelling moments from the chapters so far. Do you want me to do that next?